On a night when the snow swallowed every sound, a wounded FBI agent crashed into the frozen timber with proof powerful men would kill to bury. The only one close enough to find her was a former Navy SEAL who had already learned what happens when good people wait too long to act. But the sheriff who arrived to help was not there to save a life. She was there to finish what the ambush had started. Now hunted through the dark by badges that no longer meant justice, one man and his loyal German shepherd must carry the truth before the cold, or corruption takes it first. Every step into that white wilderness pulls them deeper into a town built on stolen land, buried names, and lies dressed like law. And before this night is over, faith, loyalty, and one last signal from the mountain may be the only things standing between mercy and murder. Tell me where you're watching from, or share how this story makes you feel, and please like and subscribe to the channel to inspire more powerful stories like this. The winter night did not begin with violence. It began with a silence so complete it felt deliberate. Snow lay over the land like a careful hand, trying to smooth out every scar beneath it. Pines stood motionless under the weight of white. Their branches bowed like old men carrying memory they refused to speak of. The wind had passed an hour earlier, leaving behind a stillness that was not peace but something closer to waiting. It was in that waiting that Asher Vale stepped out of his cabin. He moved like a man who had learned long ago that noise was a form of weakness. At 43, Asher carried the quiet weight of a former Navy SEAL not in his posture alone, but in the way he seemed to measure every movement against consequence. He stood a little over 6 feet, lean rather than broad, built for endurance instead of display. His face was clean-shaven, sharp along the jawline, with cheekbones that gave him a permanent look of restraint. His hair was dark brown, cut short in a military style softened slightly by time, and his gray-blue eyes held the kind of stillness that came from seeing too much and choosing not to speak of it. He wore what he always wore, a weathered olive-gray combat shirt, its fabric worn thin at the cuffs, and old earth-toned pants marked by use rather than neglect. His boots were military issue, long past their prime but still reliable. On his wrist, an old watch ticked with stubborn precision. Behind him, the cabin stood alone against the dark, a structure that looked less like a home and more like a decision. At his side moved Rook. Rook was a German shepherd, 4, maybe 5 years old, built lean and muscular in the way working dogs were. Not for show, but for purpose. His coat carried a deep yellow-black pattern, dark along the spine and fading into warm gold at the flanks. His eyes, amber-brown and always searching, reflected light even in darkness, giving him the unsettling appearance of seeing more than he should. Around his neck sat an old leather collar, worn but cared for, like everything else in Asher's life. Rook did not walk beside Asher. He flowed. Every few steps the dog would pause, nose lifting into the cold air, reading the invisible language of the forest. To most, the woods were silent. To Rook, they spoke in layers, old scent, new disturbance, absence where something should be. That night, something was wrong. It started as a hesitation, a slight shift in the dog's stride, then a stop. Rook's body stiffened, ears angling forward, head turning not toward the fence line they had come to check, but downslope, into the deeper dark where the land dropped away toward the ravine. Asher noticed immediately. "What is it?" he murmured, though he already knew better than to expect an answer in words. Rook did not look back. He moved. Not fast, not panicked, but with a certainty that cut through the night like a blade. Asher followed without hesitation, because that was the agreement between them. When instinct spoke, he listened. The slope was slick with ice beneath the powder. Each step had to be placed, each shift of weight calculated. The forest thickened as they descended, branches crowding closer, shadows pressing inward. And then, before they saw it, they smelled it. Burnt oil, hot metal, and beneath it, faint but unmistakable, blood. The wreck appeared in fragments, a broken reflection of metal through branches, a dark shape against white, then the full form of it, an SUV, civilian, unmarked, half collapsed against the edge of the ravine, as if the earth itself had tried to swallow it and failed. The front end was crushed inward. One tire spun slowly in the air, whining with a soft, mechanical grief before coming to a stop. Asher approached carefully, scanning first, always first. No movement, no second vehicle, no voices. Only the sound of the cooling engine ticking like a dying clock. The driver was already gone. A man in his 40s, heavy-set, with thinning hair and a face that had settled into stillness too quickly to have fought it. No weapon visible, no badge. Just a man who had been in the wrong place at the wrong moment, or the right place, depending on who had arranged it. In the passenger seat, someone moved, barely. Asher reached in, bracing against twisted metal, and found her. Special Agent Lena Cross. She was in her mid-30s, her frame slight but not fragile, the kind of build that came from discipline rather than comfort. Her dark hair was pulled back loosely, strands frozen to her skin, where sweat had turned to frost. Her face was pale beneath the blood that marked one side of her jaw, her lips tinged faintly blue from the cold. Her eyes, when they opened, were sharp despite the pain, a steel gray that did not waste time on fear. A wound tore through the upper part of her shoulder, not a clean shot, but a graze that had taken flesh and left a ragged line of bleeding. Her breathing was uneven, controlled only by force of will. But her hands were steady. They gripped a waterproof bag pressed tight against her chest. Inside it, Asher caught a glimpse of an external drive, a cracked phone, a small notebook swollen slightly from moisture. Important things. Things people killed for. He cut the seatbelt, easing her forward carefully, supporting her weight as he pulled her from the wreck. The cold hit her like a second injury. Her body shuddered, muscles trying to remember warmth. "Stay with me," Asher said quietly, his voice low, steady, the way one speaks not to command, but to anchor. Her eyes fixed on him, focusing through pain. And then she spoke. Not "help me," not "who are you?" Her voice came in a fractured whisper, each word dragged through cold air like something breaking free. "Don't call county." The words landed between them, sharp, final, wrong. For a moment the forest seemed to lean closer, as if listening. Rook, who had been circling the perimeter, froze again, but this time he did not look toward the wreck. He looked uphill, a low sound built in his throat. Not a bark, not a warning meant to scare, but something deeper. Recognition. The kind of sound a creature makes when it knows the difference between danger and intent. Asher followed the dog's gaze. At first, there was nothing. Then, faint through the trees, light, headlights, too controlled, too precise. Not the frantic search of rescue, but the measured approach of people who already knew exactly where to find what they were looking for. The silence broke, and something far worse stepped into its place. Asher moved fast. He dragged a thermal blanket from the wreck, wrapping it around Lena, then pulled a tarp loose from the cargo area and angled it between them and the approaching light. Every movement was deliberate, efficient. There was no panic in him, only calculation. The vehicles arrived in a slow, deliberate crawl. First one, then another. Doors opened. Boots met snow. And then she stepped forward. Sheriff Nora Bell. She was in her mid-40s, tall for a woman, her posture straight in a way that spoke of authority worn long enough to become identity. Her hair, a muted blonde streaked faintly with gray, was pulled back tightly beneath her hat. Her face was composed, the lines at her eyes suggesting years of decision rather than hesitation. Her uniform was immaculate, untouched by the chaos that had brought her here. Behind her stood Deputy Wade Harlan, younger, broader, his face rough with stubble and impatience. He carried himself with the restless energy of a man who preferred action over thought, his eyes already scanning, already measuring. Two other deputies fanned out behind them, quieter, less defined. Followers. "Evening," Nora called, her voice calm, controlled. "Looks like you found yourself a bad situation." Everything about her tone was right. Everything about her presence was wrong. Asher stepped slightly in front of Lena without making it obvious. Rook moved closer to his side, body low, eyes fixed on Wade. "She needs medical," Asher said. Nora nodded. "Of course she does. We'll take it from here." Her gaze flicked, not to Lena's face but to the bag in her arms, just for a second. But it was enough. Wade shifted position. Not toward the injured woman, outward, cutting angle, blocking exit. Rook's growl deepened, barely audible, but unmistakable. Wade's hand moved, subtle, toward the grip of his weapon. That was the moment. No gunshot, no accusation, just the quiet, undeniable collapse of trust. Asher reached back slowly, his hand brushing the SUV's exposed wiring. With one sharp pull, he severed the connection. The remaining light from the vehicle died instantly, plunging the scene into deeper shadow. Confusion flickered. Just enough. Asher moved. He lifted Lena, ignoring the strain, turning into the darkness where the wind shifted against the slope. Rook vanished ahead of him, already choosing the path. "Stop!" Wade shouted. A beam of light cut through the trees, but it was already too late. Snow swallowed sound, darkness swallowed shape, and the forest, cold, vast, and waiting, closed around them. Behind them, Sheriff Nora Bell stood still for a long moment. Then she lifted her radio. Her voice, when it came, carried none of the calm she had shown before. It was sharper now, controlled in a different way. "Dispatch," she said. "We have a situation." A pause. Then, clean and precise. "Armed male, former military, has taken a federal agent from an active scene. Considered dangerous." The lie settled into the system like a seed. And in a small room miles away, where wires hummed and voices came and went, someone heard it and hesitated. Back in the forest, Asher moved through the dark with a wounded agent in his arms and a dog who refused to lead him wrong. The night no longer waited. It hunted. And somewhere beneath the snow, the truth, cold, buried, and bleeding, had begun to breathe. The forest did not forgive noise. It remembered it. Asher moved through the timberline with Lena's weight pressing into his shoulders. Each step measured against the slope, the wind, and the fading strength of the woman he carried. Snow creaked beneath his boots in soft, betraying whispers. The cold was no longer an environment. It had become an adversary, quiet, patient, and certain. Rook ranged ahead, then circled back, never straying too far. The dog's body cut a low, controlled path through the drifts, nose constantly working, ears adjusting to sounds too faint for human notice. There was no panic in him, only calculation. They reached the trapper's cabin just as the wind shifted again. It was a small structure, half buried in snow, its roof sagging under years of neglect. The wood had gone gray with age, and one shutter hung crooked, tapping faintly against the wall like a slow heartbeat. Inside, the air held the stale scent of old smoke, rust, and abandonment. But it had walls. And right now, walls meant survival. Asher forced the door open with his shoulder, stepped inside, and lowered Lena carefully onto the rough plank floor near the cold stove. She made a sound this time, not loud, but enough to tell him the pain had broken through whatever discipline had been holding it back. "Stay with me," he said, already moving. He worked quickly, gloves off, hands steady. He cut away the outer layer of her jacket, exposing the wound at her shoulder. It was a grazing shot, just as he had suspected, angling through muscle, not deep enough to shatter bone. Blood loss, but not catastrophic. The ribs were worse. Bruising, likely cracked, maybe fractured. Her breathing was shallow, guarded. "Listen," he said quietly, pressing gauze into the wound. "You're not dying tonight, but you're going to feel like you are." Lena let out a weak breath that might have been a laugh, or a protest. Up close, without the chaos of the crash, she looked younger than he first thought. Mid-30s, maybe. But there was nothing soft about her. Her face carried the sharp definition of someone used to being alert, used to being alone in rooms where trust was currency she could not afford to spend lightly. There was a thin scar just beneath her jawline, old and pale, almost invisible unless the light hit it right. A reminder of something she had survived without speaking about. Her eyes flickered open again. "You always this encouraging?" she murmured. "Only when it matters." He wrapped the bandage tight, then shifted to her ribs, binding her torso just enough to stabilize without restricting breath too much. It was a balance. Everything was a balance. Rook settled near the door, body angled outward, guarding. The dog did not lie down, not yet. Lena's hand drifted weakly toward the satchel beside her. Even now, even here, she checked for it. Still there. Still everything. "Evan Kessler," she said after a moment, her voice low and uneven. "You need to know the name." Asher didn't look up from the knot he was securing. "I'm listening." "He's not just land deals," she swallowed. "He's building control, quietly. Sheriff's office, county permits, seizure records, everything that touches property. If someone can't pay, can't fight, they lose it. If they fight too hard," her voice trailed. "They disappear," Asher finished. She didn't confirm. She didn't need to. The wind outside rose again, rattling the loose shutter. Snow brushed against the cabin walls like something alive, something searching for a way in. "Bell's part of it," Lena said. "Not just covering, running interference, making sure nothing reaches outside jurisdiction." Asher finally looked at her. "How deep?" Her eyes met his. "Deep enough that calling for help gets you killed faster." Silence settled between them again. Not empty, heavy. Asher stood and crossed to the small window, wiping frost away with the back of his hand. The forest beyond was shifting, branches swaying, shadows bending. Nothing visible, but nothing ever was, until it was too late. Behind him, Lena spoke again, softer now. "There's a failsafe," she said. "My supervisor, Owen Price. If I don't check in," she exhaled slowly, "he'll know something's wrong, but not fast enough to save me." "That's not what it's for," Asher said. Her eyes flickered. "No," she admitted. "It's for after." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Rook moved, not toward the door, toward Lena. The dog approached slowly, head low, not in submission, not in aggression. Something else. Something older. He stopped just within reach, watching her face, watching her breath. Lena's hand trembled as it lifted. She didn't hesitate this time. Her fingers brushed the thick fur along his neck, just above the worn leather collar. Rook did not flinch, did not pull away. His eyes held hers, steady and unblinking. And then he lowered his head, not to her hand, to her chest, pressing lightly, just enough to feel the rhythm beneath. Her breathing, her heartbeat. For a second, Asher thought it meant nothing. Then he saw it. The change. Rook's posture shifted. Not tension, not alertness. Acceptance. A decision had been made. Lena's breathing steadied. Not stronger, not healed, but aligned. As if something inside her, something close to slipping, had found a line to hold on to again. Her eyes closed briefly, not in unconsciousness, but in something quieter. Trust. Not in Asher. Not in the badge she wore. In the dog. Asher felt something tighten in his chest. Not fear. Not doubt. Recognition. There were moments in life when logic stopped being the strongest guide. This was one of them. And then it passed. The wind shifted again. Rook's head snapped up. The change was immediate. Back to work. Asher moved to the door, listening. Nothing. Then, a sound. Faint. Too controlled to be random. Footsteps. Not one. Several. Spread out. Searching. He exhaled slowly. "They're faster than I thought," he murmured. Lena's eyes opened again, sharper now despite the pain. "They'll use the road first, then sweep." "They already are." Asher scanned the room quickly. No second exit. No concealment worth trusting. If they stayed, they would be found. Not immediately, but soon enough. He crossed back to Lena and began relayering her clothing, tighter this time, preparing for movement. "You can walk?" he asked. "For a few steps," she said. "That's enough." He fashioned a crude drag harness from rope and the cabin's old canvas, working without wasted motion. Not comfortable, not gentle, but efficient. Lena watched him. "You've done this before?" "Yes." She didn't ask more. Outside, a voice carried faintly through the trees. "Wade." Closer now. "Spread out. He's here somewhere." The arrogance in his tone was unmistakable. He believed this was already over. Asher finished securing the harness and looked down at Lena. "We move slow, quiet. You pass out, I keep going." She gave a faint nod. "Good," he said. Rook was already at the door, waiting. When Asher opened it, the cold rushed in like a living thing. The forest no longer felt empty. It felt occupied. They stepped out into it anyway. Behind them, the cabin stood as it had for years, silent, forgotten, holding no memory of the brief war that had passed through its walls. Ahead, the timber swallowed them again. And somewhere in that darkness, men with badges hunted like wolves who had forgotten what they were meant to protect. Asher adjusted the line across his shoulders and followed Rook into the deeper black, each step carrying them farther from the lie and closer to whatever truth was worth bleeding for. The forest closed behind them like a door that had never existed. Snow fell in thin, needling threads now, carried sideways by a wind that had found its teeth again. Each gust scraped across exposed skin and forced breath to come slower, deeper, measured against the risk of losing warmth. Asher adjusted the drag line across his shoulders without breaking stride. The improvised sled behind him, a crude lattice of branches wrapped in canvas, cut a narrow path through the powder, whispering its presence with every inch. Lena lay secured against it, her body wrapped in layers that were no longer enough, but still everything they had. Her face had gone pale beneath the bruising, lips tinged faintly blue at the edges. Every now and then, she surfaced, eyes flickering open just long enough to orient herself, to confirm that the satchel remained pressed tight against her chest, then sinking again into that dangerous gray space between consciousness and absence. Rook moved ahead, then back, then ahead again. Never wandering, never wasting motion. His body rode the terrain like something born of it, shoulders rolling low, paws finding purchase where the snow hid ice beneath. His nose cut arcs through the air, catching fragments, human scent, stale tobacco, gun oil, wool, fear, all layered into a map that only he could read. Asher trusted that map, more than the one in his own head. They crossed a fallen log slick with ice. Asher braced, pulled, felt the drag catch, then release. His muscles burned, not from strain alone, but from the cold gnawing into them, with quiet persistence. Fatigue was not a sudden collapse. It was a slow erasure. And still he moved, because stopping was not rest. Stopping was surrender. "You still with me?" he asked over his shoulder. A pause. Then, "Unfortunately." The word came thin, but it came. Asher allowed himself the smallest exhale. "Good. Means you're still stubborn." Lena shifted slightly against the bindings. The movement cost her. He could hear it in the way her breath stuttered. "I'm not dying in a county I don't even like," she muttered. Strong motivation. Better than faith. He didn't answer that. Not because he disagreed. Because he wasn't sure. They moved in silence for a while after that. The kind of silence that was not empty, but occupied by thought too heavy to voice. The slope began to rise. The trees thinned slightly, their trunks spaced farther apart, allowing the wind to move more freely through them. Snow here had hardened into crusted layers, easier to pull across, but louder if misstepped. Asher slowed, listened. Nothing obvious, but the absence of sound could be its own warning. He adjusted direction, angling slightly west, moving against the wind so their scent trail fractured behind them. It wasn't perfect. Nothing in this terrain was. But it was enough to buy time. Time was the only currency they had left. Behind him, Lena stirred again. "You ever hesitate?" she asked suddenly. The question came without context, without warning. Asher didn't turn. About what? Pulling the trigger. The wind answered first, then, yes. That seemed to surprise her. Even in her state, he could feel the shift in attention. "You don't look like someone who does." "I didn't say I always stopped." Another silence. Then, softer. "I did once," he added. The words came without effort, but not without weight. "I waited. Thought I had time to confirm, to follow procedure, to be certain." He paused, stepping over a hidden root. "I was wrong." Lena didn't ask what happened. She understood enough. "That's why you didn't hand me over," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," Asher said. "That's why I don't wait for permission anymore." The wind shifted again. Rook froze. Not gradually, instantly. His entire body locked, one paw lifted mid-step, head angled slightly left, ears forward, tail stiff but not raised. Asher stopped without thinking. The rope tightened. The sled slid forward half an inch, then stilled. Everything in him narrowed. Rook didn't growl, didn't move. That was worse. Asher crouched slowly, lowering his center of gravity, scanning the trees. Shadows, snow, movement where branches swayed, but no shape, no figure, no clear threat. And yet, something was there, not seen, felt. He waited. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Then Rook exhaled. Not relief, adjustment. The dog shifted direction, stepping off the path they had been following and angling deeper into the timber, away from the subtle dip in the land ahead. Asher followed without question. He didn't need to understand what Rook had sensed, only that it mattered. Asher glanced once toward the direction they had just avoided. The snow there looked undisturbed. Perfect. Too perfect. Then, just as the wind shifted again, he saw it. Not a figure, not movement. A line. Faint. Almost invisible. A shallow depression across the snow, stretched between two trees at knee height. Tripwire. Crude. Effective. Placed by someone who knew how men moved when they were tired, when they were cold, when they thought they were alone. Asher felt a slow, cold realization settle deeper than the weather. This wasn't just a search. It was a hunt that had learned how he thought. He turned away from it. Didn't look back again. And for the first time that night, something unfamiliar brushed against the edges of his control. Not fear. Respect. For an enemy who understood patience. They moved on. The terrain grew steeper, the air thinner. Lena slipped again into near unconsciousness, her responses slower now, her body conserving what little energy remained. Asher adjusted the drag, shortened the line, redistributed the weight across his shoulders. Each correction was small. Each one mattered. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time lost its edges in the cold. Eventually, Lena spoke again, voice barely audible over the wind. "Kessler doesn't get his hands dirty," she murmured. "He doesn't need to." Asher said nothing. "He uses systems, paper, debt, pressure." A shallow breath. "People sign things when they're scared, when they're tired, when they think no one's coming." Her fingers tightened weakly around the satchel. "He counts on that." Asher pulled harder against the slope. "And Belle?" A pause. "She thinks she's saving something," Lena said. "That's what makes her dangerous. Not greed, not rage, conviction. That was harder to fight." The trees began to thin further now, opening toward a higher ridge. The sky above shifted from heavy gray to something lighter, though the sun itself remained hidden behind layered cloud. Asher slowed again. Not because he wanted to, because he had to. His body was reaching the edge where endurance became damage. He leaned forward, hands braced against his thighs for a moment, breath controlled, eyes scanning the ridgeline ahead. And then he saw it. Far off, half obscured by drifting snow, a structure. Tall, angular, alone. An old fire lookout tower, its silhouette cutting against the pale sky like something left behind by a world that had forgotten it. For a second, it didn't feel real. Just a shape. A possibility. But then the wind shifted again, clearing the view just enough to confirm it. Wood. Elevation. Access. And maybe, just maybe, power. Lena followed his gaze weakly. Her eyes narrowed, focusing with effort. "There," she whispered. He nodded. "Yeah." Hope was a dangerous thing. It made people careless. He didn't let it change his pace, didn't let it touch his decisions. But it existed now, a point on the horizon, a reason to keep moving forward instead of just away. Behind them, somewhere far below the ridge, voices carried faintly through the timber, closer than before. The hunt was tightening. Asher straightened slowly, resetting the line across his shoulders. Rook moved ahead again, already orienting toward the tower. Lena closed her eyes briefly, then opened them once more. "Don't let them bury it," she murmured. Asher didn't answer. He didn't need to. He took the next step, then another, and another, each one pulling them higher, farther from the place where the lie had been born, and closer to the only place left where truth might still have a voice. The wind howled louder as they climbed. The forest thinned, and the tower waited. The town did not sleep. It only dimmed. Lights remained on behind drawn curtains. Televisions flickered against frost-lined windows, and somewhere in the distance, a generator coughed unevenly beneath the strain of winter. Pine Hollow, or what remained of it, held itself together with routine and quiet endurance. On the surface, nothing had changed. But beneath that surface, something had already shifted. It lived in the wires, in the voices carried through them, in the pauses that were just a fraction too long. Inside the county dispatch office, Mara Givens sat alone beneath a ceiling light that hummed with a tired, persistent buzz. She was 52, with a narrow frame that had thinned more from years than from illness. Her hair, once dark, had gone silver at the temples and was now kept tied back in a loose knot that never quite held by the end of a shift. Her face was lined, not harshly, but with the quiet wear of someone who had listened to too many emergencies and not enough good endings. Her skin carried the pale tone of a life spent indoors, lit more by fluorescent bulbs than daylight. But her eyes, soft brown, observant, steady, had not dulled. They had learned to hear what people did not say, learned to recognize when a voice carried something it shouldn't. Tonight, those instincts had nowhere to rest. The radio crackled again. "Suspect is armed. Former military. Has abducted a federal agent." Sheriff Nora Bell's voice. Controlled, measured, perfect, too perfect. Mara leaned back slightly in her chair, one hand resting lightly against the console, the other holding a pen she had not used in several minutes. Around her, the room was quiet. No other operators, no chatter, just the low electronic murmur of systems that never truly turned off. She replayed the call in her head. Not the words, the rhythm. Something was off. It had been off before. Not just tonight. For months now, Mara had been hearing it in fragments, calls that arrived without full coordinates, patrol routes that changed without documentation, response times that stretched too long in the wrong places and arrived too fast in others. Small inconsistencies, each one explainable on its own. Together, they formed a pattern, and Mara had spent a lifetime learning that patterns mattered. She reached for the keyboard, paused, then withdrew her hand. The system in front of her wasn't just a tool anymore. It was being used. That realization had come slowly, like frost creeping along glass. At first invisible, then undeniable. A call blinked in the queue. She accepted it. Static. Then a voice. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. We're sweeping grid Delta 7. No visual yet." Mara checked the map overlay. Delta 7. That was wrong. Not by much, but enough. She pressed the transmit button. "Copy, Unit 4, she said, her voice calm, neutral. "Hold position. Redirect to Delta 8. Suspect movement reported." There was a pause, a hesitation. Then, "Copy. Redirecting." She released the button. The pen in her hand trembled slightly. Delta 8 led away from the ridge, away from where she suspected Asher Vale might actually be. It was a small change, a delay measured in minutes. But minutes could matter. She knew that better than most. Her eyes shifted to the side monitor, where the system tracked active units. Small icons blinked across the grid, each one representing a vehicle, a person, a decision in motion. Too many converging. Too fast. "Sheriff's pushing hard tonight," came a voice from the doorway. Mara turned. Tom Alvarez stood there, pulling off his gloves and stamping snow from his boots. He was in his late 40s, broad-shouldered, with thick, dark hair streaked prematurely with gray. His beard was trimmed short, practical, and his face carried the permanent tension of a man who had spent years responding to emergencies he could never quite outrun. Tom wasn't law enforcement. He was county EMS, one of the few who still believed his job meant saving whoever needed saving. He had a habit of looking people in the eye when they spoke. That alone made him different. "She called you in?" Mara asked. "Yeah," he said, shrugging out of his coat. "Said we might have an injured federal agent out there, but no coordinates yet. That strike you as odd?" Mara held his gaze for a second longer than usual. "Yes," she said. Tom frowned slightly. "You okay?" "I've been better." He stepped closer, lowering his voice instinctively. "You think something's wrong?" Mara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced at the radio, at the blinking icons, at the pattern forming, then back at him. "I think," she said carefully, "we're not being told everything." Tom exhaled slowly, the sound carrying more weight than the words. "That's not new," he muttered. "No," Mara agreed. "But this is different." Before he could respond, the radio cracked again. Wade Harlan's voice this time. "Dispatch, we've got tracks heading north. Requesting confirmation. Did any units move through that sector earlier?" Mara's fingers hovered over the keys. The system had the answer. Clear, precise, and wrong to give. She pressed the button. "Negative, Unit 3, she said. "No recorded movement. Proceed with caution." A lie. A small one. But it settled into the air like something heavier. Tom watched her. Didn't say anything. But he understood. The console flickered. Just once. A subtle glitch. Mara's eyes snapped to the lower corner of the screen, where a rarely used system indicator blinked faintly. So faint it could have been dismissed as a hardware fault. But she knew better. It was tied to an old emergency channel. Forest Service. Barely maintained. Almost forgotten. Almost. The indicator blinked again. Not random. Not malfunction. A signal. Somewhere out there, something had tried to reach through the noise. Mara felt a quiet certainty settle into her chest. Not fear, not panic, but something steadier. A line had been drawn, and for the first time in a long time, she knew exactly which side she stood on. The moment passed. The screen stabilized. Tom shifted beside her. "You see that?" "No," Mara said softly, but her hand had already moved. She accessed the secondary system, slowly, carefully, making it look like routine maintenance. The old channel took longer to load, its interface clunky, outdated, but still functional. If someone was listening on the right frequency, if someone outside the county was paying attention, this could be enough. Not to fix anything, not yet, but to let the truth breathe. Behind her, Tom stepped back, giving her space. "You're taking a risk," he said quietly. Mara didn't look up. "So is whoever's out there." She entered a short sequence. No message, no words, just a pulse, a presence. Then she closed the channel. The room returned to its low, humming stillness. But something had changed. Not visibly, not immediately, but it had changed. Across town, inside a dimly lit office that smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive silence, Evan Kessler stood with his back to the window, phone pressed to his ear. He was in his late 50s, tall, with a build that had once been athletic but had softened into something more comfortable. His hair was silver, cut neatly, his face clean-shaven, his features refined in the way of men who had spent their lives in controlled environments. But there was nothing soft in his eyes. They were sharp, calculating, always measuring value, of land, of people, of outcomes. "Tell me this is contained," he said. His voice was low, controlled, but beneath it, tension coiled tight. On the other end, Nora Bell did not respond immediately. When she did, her tone was just as steady. "It will be." "That's not what I asked." Silence, then. "It's under control," Nora said. Kessler turned slightly, looking out at the snow-covered streets below. "You told me this was clean." "It was." "Was," he repeated. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, warped slightly by the frost. "I don't pay for was, Nora." Her voice cooled. "You pay for results." Another pause. Then, sharper. "Then get me one." The call ended. Back at the dispatch office, Mara leaned back in her chair, the weight of what she had done settling slowly into her bones. Tom had already stepped away, pulling his coat back on. "You didn't see anything," he said, not unkindly. Mara gave a faint nod. "Neither did you." He paused at the door, then added, "Be careful." The door closed behind him. Mara was alone again. The radio continued. Units moving. Voices reporting. A hunt tightening. And somewhere beyond the reach of her screens, a man and a dog were carrying something that mattered more than any of it. She rested her hand lightly against the console, not to steady herself, but to feel it. The hum, the connection, the thin line between silence and signal. And she chose, quietly, to keep that line open. The ridge did not welcome them. It judged them. Wind struck first, hard, lateral, unrelenting. It tore at Asher's clothing, forced his breath into controlled bursts, and scraped the warmth from his skin with a kind of indifferent cruelty. Snow no longer fell gently here. It moved sideways, like ash carried from something burning far beyond sight. Asher leaned into it, adjusting the line across his shoulders as the drag sled scraped behind him. Every pull was heavier now, not just from Lena's weight, but from what the climb demanded. Ahead, the forest began to fracture. Pines gave way to scattered growth, their branches thinner, their cover weaker. The terrain shifted from sheltered depth into something exposed, where movement could be seen from a distance, and where mistakes had nowhere to hide. Rook slowed, not stopping, just tightening. His movements became sharper, more deliberate. His head turned more often, nose lifting into the wind, recalibrating with each shift of scent. The dog was no longer simply guiding. He was calculating survival. Behind Asher, Lena made a sound, not a word, a fracture of breath. He didn't stop. Stopping would mean losing momentum, and momentum was the only thing holding them together now. "You're still here," he said quietly. A pause. Then, "Regrettably," she rasped. "Good." Still fighting. Her voice was thinner now. Each word cost her more than the last. Her body had begun conserving energy the way all bodies did when pushed too far, slowing, narrowing, preparing to shut down systems that were no longer essential. But her hand still clutched the satchel. Always the satchel. "What's in it?" Asher asked, not looking back. "Proof," she said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters." He didn't argue, because he understood. They reached the edge of the tree line, and the world opened. The clearing stretched before them like a wound in the forest. White, exposed, unforgiving. The fire lookout tower stood at the far end, rising from the ridge like a forgotten sentinel. Its frame was skeletal, weather-beaten, but intact. A narrow stairway spiraled upward along its side, half covered in snow. Distance, too far to sprint. Cover, none. Risk, everything. Asher crouched slightly, lowering his profile. "Stay conscious," he said. "We cross fast." Lena didn't respond. That worried him more than anything she had said. Rook stepped forward onto the open snow, then paused. The dog's body lowered, almost imperceptibly. Not fear, not hesitation, awareness. Asher scanned the clearing again. Nothing moved. Nothing broke the surface. But something was wrong. The silence here was different. Too tight. Too held. He exhaled slowly. "Okay," he murmured. "We do this the hard way." He reached down, tightened the drag harness, and adjusted Lena's position to reduce drag resistance. Every second mattered. Then he moved. Fast, controlled, direct. The snow resisted, catching at the sled, slowing progress, forcing him to exert more force than he could afford. His boots punched through the crust with each step, sending small bursts of powder outward. Halfway across, a crack, not loud, but sharp. Gunfire. The round struck the snow just ahead of him, kicking up a white plume. Asher dropped instantly, dragging the sled sideways as he rolled behind the shallow dip in the terrain, barely enough to break line of sight. Another shot. Closer, more precise. Not random fire. A shooter who had been waiting. Wade. Had to be. Asher's jaw tightened. He didn't return fire. Didn't even reach for his weapon. Because this wasn't about winning a firefight. It was about surviving one. "Stay down," he muttered, though Lena had not moved. Rook had already vanished from his peripheral vision. Gone. Not retreating. Flanking. Good. Asher counted. 1, 2, 3. The shots stopped. Silence again. That was worse. Then movement. A figure emerging at the edge of the tree line behind them. Deputy. Young. Nervous. Weapon raised too high, grip too tight. Asher moved before the deputy could adjust. He closed the distance in seconds, using the terrain, the wind, the blind angle. The strike was fast, controlled, hand to wrist, weapon redirected, momentum broken. The deputy went down hard. Breath knocked from him, weapon sliding free. Asher didn't hesitate. He stripped the weapon, disabled it, then dragged the man into the shallow cover and bound his hands with a length of cord. The deputy's eyes were wide. Not rage, not hatred. Fear. "I didn't sign up for this," he whispered. Asher looked at him. Really looked. Young. Too young. The kind of face that still believed rules meant something. "Neither did she," Asher said, nodding toward Lena. Then he was moving again. No time for more. Rook reappeared at the far edge of the clearing. But something was wrong. He wasn't moving like before. He wasn't circling. He wasn't distracting. He was standing still, completely still, facing the tree line. Asher's breath slowed, because Rook never did that without reason. Then, another figure stepped into view. Not Wade, not a deputy. Sheriff Nora Bell. She stood alone, her posture straight, her weapon lowered but ready. Snow gathered along the shoulders of her coat, unmoving. Her face was calm, too calm. "You don't have to do this, Asher," she called out. Her voice carried cleanly through the wind. No strain, no urgency, just certainty. "You think you're saving something," she continued. "You're not. You're making it worse." Asher didn't respond. He couldn't afford to. But something in her tone. It wasn't anger. It wasn't desperation. It was belief. And that made her more dangerous than any of the others. Behind her, unseen but implied, the rest of the net was closing. Rook didn't move, didn't growl. He simply watched her. And for a moment, just a moment, Asher felt the weight of something larger than the night pressing in. Not just a fight, a choice. Then it passed. Action returned. Asher grabbed the drag line again, pulled hard. They moved. Nora didn't fire. Not yet. That told him everything. She still wanted control, still wanted the outcome shaped. That gave him a window. Small, but enough. The tower loomed closer now. Each step shortened the distance. Each step risked everything. Behind them, voices rose again, Wade shouting, others converging, the hunt collapsing inward. Lena stirred weakly, her voice barely more than breath. "Don't stop." "I'm not," Asher said, and he wasn't. Even when his arm burned where something had torn across it, a sharp line of pain he hadn't registered until now. Blood seeped beneath his sleeve, warm for a moment before the cold began to claim it. Even when his legs felt heavier than they should, even when the wind seemed determined to push him backward with every step forward. He kept moving, because stopping wasn't an option anymore. The base of the tower was only yards away now. The structure creaked softly in the wind, old wood protesting the weight of years and weather. The stairs spiraled upward, narrow, exposed, but intact. Reach it. Hold it. That was the plan. That was all that remained. Asher dragged Lena to the base, then dropped to one knee, breath controlled, eyes scanning for movement. Rook reached them seconds later, positioning himself at the edge of the clearing, watching the approach. Always watching. The world narrowed to this point. This place, this moment. Asher looked up at the tower, then back toward the forest. They had made it, but the night hadn't ended, not even close. And somewhere in the trees, men who believed they owned the law were coming to take it all back. The tower groaned like something remembering how to stand. Wind struck it from all sides, rattling the old timbers, slipping through every crack in the boards, turning the structure into a living instrument of strain and endurance. The fire lookout rose above the ridge on narrow supports, its platform exposed to the sky, its windows clouded with frost and years of neglect, beautiful in the way only dangerous places were. Asher did not admire it. He assessed it. Load-bearing points, sight lines, entry angles, weak spots. He dragged Lena across the threshold of the small cabin at the top, boots scraping wood that had not held weight in years. The door slammed behind them under the force of the wind, and for a moment, the sound seemed too loud, too final. Rook followed, then immediately moved to the far edge of the platform, positioning himself near the outer railing, where scent and sound carried best. His body angled outward, ears shifting in constant motion, reading the invisible language of the storm. Inside, the space was small. One room, a rusted stove, a broken chair, a narrow cot collapsed against the wall. A control panel sat beneath the far window, old, outdated, but intact enough to matter. Lena's eyes fixed on it. "That's it," she whispered, her voice barely surviving the cold. Asher lowered her carefully against the wall near the panel. Her body had grown heavier, not in mass, but in resistance, the kind of weight that came when the body began letting go. "Stay with me," he said again. She didn't answer, but her hand still moved, still reached for the satchel. Good. That meant she was still here. Asher moved quickly, sealing the door as best he could with what remained of the broken furniture. Not enough to stop a determined push, but enough to delay. Delay was all they needed. He checked the windows, frosted, but clear enough to see shapes moving below if they came close. Then he turned back. Lena had already begun. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the encrypted drive from the satchel, along with a small device, damaged, casing cracked along one side. The screen flickered weakly as she pressed the power. "Come on," she murmured, more to the machine than to herself. The panel responded slowly. Old solar reserves, barely holding charge. "Talk to me," Asher said, moving beside her. She swallowed, forcing focus. "This system, it's got a relay uplink. Old Forest Service network. If I can stabilize it, I can push a packet." "How long?" "I don't know." Not the answer he wanted, but the only one that mattered. Below them, a voice carried upward through the wind. "Wade." Closer now. Asher exhaled slowly. "Then we make time." He crossed back to the door, checking the barricade again, then repositioned himself where he could watch both the entrance and Lena. Rook remained outside, not moving, not barking, waiting. Minutes passed, or seconds. Time had become unreliable. Lena worked through the pain, fingers slipping once, then correcting, her breathing uneven as she tried to align the device with the panel's input. "Come on," she whispered again. The screen flickered. Then, a signal. Weak. But there. Her breath caught. "Okay. Okay." The screen shifted suddenly. Not to the interface she expected, but to a prompt. Unauthorized access detected. For a split second, Lena froze. That shouldn't have been possible. Not out here. Not on this system. Then she understood. Someone was watching. Not from outside the county. From inside. A hand already inside the network. Waiting. Her eyes flicked to Asher. "They know," she said. The words came out steady. Too steady. "They've been waiting for this." Asher didn't hesitate. "Then we don't give them time to stop it." Outside. A crash. Heavy. Wood splintering. The first attempt at the lower access point. They were climbing. Fast. Lena's fingers moved again, faster now, bypassing the corrupted interface, forcing a manual handshake. Sweat beaded along her forehead, despite the cold, her body burning through its last reserves. Just a little more. Below, footsteps hit the stairs. Multiple. Close. Asher drew his weapon, not to fire but to hold, to control space. Rook's posture shifted. Not panic. Alert. Focused. The door shuddered. Once. Twice. Then held. For now. "Almost," Lena whispered. Then, the signal locked. A faint tone confirmed connection. Her eyes widened. "I have it," she said. But that was only the beginning. Uploading wasn't instant. Not here. Not like this. It crawled. Data pushing through a fragile line, vulnerable to interruption, to interference. Every second stretched. Every second mattered. The door burst inward. Wood splintered. Wade Harlan came through first. He moved with force, with certainty, weapon raised, eyes locked onto the room. Asher met him halfway. No gunfire. Too close. Too risky. The impact was brutal, body against body, momentum breaking into controlled violence. Asher redirected the weapon, forced Wade's arm aside, drove him into the wall with enough force to rattle the structure itself. Wade fought back hard, strong, angry, but not precise. Asher was. A strike to the wrist, a twist of leverage. The weapon fell, a final movement, calculated, contained, and Wade hit the floor, breath knocked from his song, consciousness flickering but not gone. Alive. That mattered. Asher stepped back, turned, and stopped. Sheriff Nora Bell stood in the doorway, alone, her weapon raised, her face unchanged. No rage, no panic, only that same cold certainty. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said. Lena didn't look up, didn't respond. Her focus was absolute. Data continued to crawl across the screen. Nora's eyes shifted briefly to the panel, then back. "This town was already dying," she continued. "People were leaving. Businesses closing. Kessler gave it a future." "At what cost?" Asher asked. Nora didn't hesitate. "At the cost of reality," she said. "You think the law is clean? It isn't. It's survival." Behind her, more movement on the stairs. Time was gone. Lena's voice broke through, sharp despite the weakness. "Done." The word hit the air like something solid. Nora reacted instantly. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Asher moved. The shot went wide, deflected, the bullet tearing through the wall behind them instead of finding its mark. The recoil snapped Nora's aim off just enough. Enough. Asher closed the distance, disarmed her with a controlled strike, twisting the weapon free and sending it skidding across the floor. Silence fell. Not complete, but different. Lena sagged back against the wall, her hand falling from the console. The screen flickered once, then went dark. Upload complete. Outside, distant at first, then growing. The sound of rotors, vehicles. Movement not controlled by Nora. Not anymore. Asher stood there, breathing steady, the weight of the moment settling into something deeper than victory. It wasn't over. Not yet. But the truth had left the mountain, and no one down below could bury it now. Morning did not arrive all at once. It slipped into the world like a quiet confession. At first, it was only a thinning of darkness, the black of night loosening into a deep gray, the edges of the trees below the ridge beginning to separate from the sky. Then came the light itself, not warm, not forgiving, but honest. It touched the fire lookout in pale strokes, revealing every crack in the wood, every line of frost along the railing, every mark left behind by the night that refused to let go. Asher stood at the edge of the platform, his hand resting loosely against the cold timber, his breathing steady but heavy beneath the silence that followed violence. Below, the forest no longer hid what it had witnessed. Tracks cut through the snow, too many, too scattered, some ending abruptly, others circling back in confusion. The signs of a hunt that had collapsed under its own weight. Behind him, Lena Cross was still alive. Barely, but alive. Her body had gone still in the way of someone who had spent everything and was waiting for the world to decide what came next. The satchel lay beside her now, no longer clutched with desperation, but still within reach, as if even in exhaustion. She refused to let it drift too far. Rook moved quietly across the platform, no longer tense in the same way, but not at ease either. His coat was stiff with ice, his breath visible in short bursts, his amber eyes scanning the horizon with the slow, deliberate calm of a creature that understood danger did not end just because the night had. Then, the sound came, low, distant, different. Not the harsh, uneven noise of vehicles forcing their way through snow. This was controlled, rhythmic, purposeful. Asher turned slightly, his eyes narrowing as the first helicopter broke through the cloud cover, its dark shape cutting across the pale sky like a shadow with intention. Behind it, another followed. And below, far off but closing, vehicles moved in formation. Organized, precise, not the scattered pursuit of the county deputies. This was something else, something clean. Lena stirred at the sound. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening just enough to recognize what she was hearing. "Price," she whispered. Asher didn't respond. He didn't need to. The shift in the air said enough. The sound of authority returning, not perfect, but real. The helicopter circled once, then lowered, careful of the wind, careful of the unstable structure. Snow whipped outward under the force of its rotors, blinding for a moment, then clearing again in sharp bursts of visibility. Men moved quickly as it touched down just below the ridge. Among them, one figure moved differently, not faster, not louder, just certain. Supervisory Special Agent Owen Price climbed the last stretch on foot. He was in his early 50s, tall but not imposing in the physical sense. His strength came from something else: precision, restraint, the kind of authority that did not need to prove itself because it had already been tested too many times. His hair was cut short, iron gray, his face clean but lined deeply around the eyes and mouth, each crease a quiet record of decisions made under pressure. His gaze moved once across the scene. The broken door, the restrained deputy, Nora Bell disarmed but standing, Asher near the railing, and then settled on Lena. Everything else became secondary. "Agent Cross," he said, his voice calm, even as he knelt beside her. No panic, no dramatics, just immediate action. He checked her pulse, her breathing, the wound, hands steady, efficient. Another medic followed close behind, a younger man with sharp features and quick movements, already preparing equipment. "She's hypothermic," the medic said. "I can see that," Price replied without looking up. "Stabilize and move." The medic nodded, no offense taken. This was a man used to command that did not waste time on ego. Behind them, two agents moved toward Nora Bell. She did not resist. She stood with her shoulders squared, her expression unchanged, her hands visible, not defeated, but no longer in control. For a brief moment, as one of the agents reached for her wrists, Nora's eyes lifted, not toward Asher, not toward Lena, but toward the town below, barely visible through the thinning haze. Something shifted in her expression. Not regret, not quite. Recognition, as if, in that single glance, she saw the truth she had spent so long reshaping, finally standing without her permission. And for the first time, her certainty cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that could not be undone. Then it was gone. The cuffs clicked into place. Metal against metal. Final. The moment passed like breath in cold air. Asher watched it all without moving. Wade Harlan was carried out next, alive, restrained, his earlier aggression replaced now with something quieter, more hollow. The kind of look that came when a man realized the story he had told himself no longer held. Below the ridge, more vehicles arrived. State police, federal units, clean lines, clear command. The structure of law, reassembling itself piece by piece. Not perfect, but present. Across town, at that same hour, Mara Givens stood outside the dispatch building for the first time since her shift had ended. She had not gone home. Not yet. The cold air touched her face as she stepped onto the pavement, her hands tucked deep into her coat. The sky above Pine Hollow was brighter now, the light revealing the town in a way it hadn't been seen in months. Honest. Exposed. Tom Alvarez stood a few steps away, leaning against the hood of his EMS vehicle, watching the same sky. "They're saying Federal's taking over," he said. Mara nodded once. "I know." He glanced at her. "You did something." It wasn't a question. She didn't answer. Not directly. But she didn't deny it either. Tom gave a small, quiet exhale. About time someone did. Back on the ridge, the medic team secured Lena onto a stretcher. She resisted, weakly, but with intent. "The drive," she said. "It's already out," Price replied. "You did your job." Her eyes searched his face. For a second, she looked like she might argue. Then the fight left her. Not because she gave up, because she finally didn't have to carry it alone. She nodded once. That was enough. They lifted her carefully, moving her toward the helicopter. Asher stepped back, giving them space. No words exchanged, none needed. Price rose after a moment and approached him. They stood facing each other in the thinning wind. "You stayed," Price said. Asher shrugged slightly. "Didn't have much choice." "You always have a choice." Asher's gaze drifted briefly toward the forest, then back. "Not always the right one." Price studied him for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. "Today you did." No praise, no ceremony, just acknowledgement. It meant more that way. Rook moved then, stepping closer to Asher's side, his posture finally easing, just slightly, as the tension that had held him through the night began to release. A medic passed nearby, distracted for a second, holding a wrapped sandwich in one hand. That was all it took. Rook's head tilted. A quick, precise movement. And half the sandwich was gone before the man even realized what had happened. For a second, the medic stared, then blinked. "Did that dog just—" Asher didn't answer, didn't even look. But there was the faintest shift at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Something close. Life. Insisting on itself in the smallest, most ordinary way. The helicopter lifted soon after, carrying Lena away from the ridge, from the town, from everything that had tried to bury her. The rest would follow. Paperwork, investigations, truths uncovered slowly, painfully. But that was no longer Asher's fight. He turned toward the forest, Rook already beside him. The snow still lay thick between the trees. The cold had not lessened, but something in the air had changed. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was open. Asher took a step forward, then another, leaving behind the noise, the authority, the structure that would now handle what came next. Ahead, the woods stretched endless and indifferent, but no longer empty, because somewhere behind him, the truth had been carried out of the dark. And somewhere ahead, life waited, uncertain, unforgiving, but still his to walk through. He didn't look back. he didn't need to. In the end, the miracle was not the storm breaking, nor the helicopters rising over the ridge, nor even the truth escaping the hands that tried to bury it. The miracle was quieter than that. It lived in a man who chose not to turn away. It lived in a wounded woman who refused to let go of what was right. It lived in a loyal dog who trusted without question and stood where others would have fled. Sometimes, God does not part the sky or stop the storm. Sometimes, He sends strength into the hearts of those who are willing to carry one another through it. In our daily lives, the battles are not always fought in snow or darkness, but they are just as real. Moments when it is easier to stay silent than to stand up. Moments when doing the right thing costs more than we think we can afford. Moments when we wonder if anyone is watching, if anything we do truly matters. But maybe this story reminds us of something simple and powerful. Even when the world feels broken, even when the truth seems buried, even when fear surrounds us, there is always a path forward for those who choose courage, faith, and compassion. Maybe the miracle is not that darkness disappears. Maybe the miracle is that light continues to move through us anyway. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who might need hope today. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what this story made you feel. And if you believe in stories that remind us of strength, faith, and second chances, consider subscribing to the channel so we can continue this journey together. May God watch over you, protect you, and guide you through whatever storms you are facing.